A lot of things go into the sound of your snare drum. Tension, mass, pitch. Today, we're going to check them out with the DrumDial. We have talked a lot about how we don't use gadgets here to do tuning, but today we're actually not exactly doing tuning because the DrumDial doesn't measure tuning. It measures tension of the head, and that's what we're exploring here, specifically with regards to what tension means for the sound of the drum, especially when we're just trying to tune it up to a sound that we like. We have been super excited about this for a while because there are a lot of things that our ears can't really measure. And in this case particular, we're talking about tympanic pressure, how it relates to the sound, and also the feel of the drum, which is another one of those difficult to quantify kinds of things. First up, right out of the gate, we're putting me to the test here. I'm going to tune this drum up by ear and see how close I got to even tension with the DrumDial. Well, this sounds pretty good to me. It does definitely sound like a drum, but how accurate was I? As opposed to some other devices that are used for tuning or tensioning drums, this doesn't measure the pitch or the sound really at all. It is measuring the tympanic tension or tympanic pressure that the head has. What this means for us is that we go around the drum with the DrumDial and set it directly on the head at each tension rod to get a measurement of the literal tension that the head is under at that specific spot. The amount of torque or tension that each of the rods is under is not a part of this at all. If you have difficult to turn rods or anything like that, this does not factor in. This is only measuring the tension of the head. That's it. By getting even tension all the way around, we should end up with an even tuning because we are literally measuring the tension which results in the sound that we get. As I did it by ear, I got pretty close. We have a little bit of a variance here, but they're mainly centered around an 88 on the dial. So the next thing I'm going to do is use the DrumDial to even out the tension on the head around to arrive at every single node being tuned to 88. Well, it still sounds like a drum. To my ear, it is a little bit more evenly in tune. I don't always go for the absolute scientifically perfect sound all the way around because generally speaking, those teeny tiny nuances don't make it into microphones or audience ears in a way that makes me feel like I need to spend those extra few minutes exactly perfecting it, especially because if you're hitting even at medium aggression or particularly hard, they're going to back out a little bit and become uneven over the course of a show anyhow. Now, having said that, and speaking of shows, the really amazing thing about the DrumDial is that since audio is not a part of this, you can use this in an extremely loud environment. For instance, if you have to change heads in a space where you can't hear the drum at all, and doubly so if you need to do it quickly. Additionally, if you're in a situation in the studio or teching or wherever you might find yourself where you need to quickly recreate the sound of a drum in the process of switching out heads, you can get very close to the sound with these measurements. And if you have to make tiny adjustments because of the inconsistencies in the heads you're using or something like that, you can make those after you get squarely in the ballpark. Let's take a moment to listen to this tuning and really get into the exact pitch that the drum is tuned to right now. We're looking at 427.7 hertz for the batter head on this drum currently. Pretty much middle of the road for the way that I like to tune snare drums. And now we want to take an interesting step, kind of a side step, and switch to a drum head that has more mass. Specifically, we're going from a 10 mil G1 to a 12 mil G12. We're going to tune it up with the DrumDial. We're not going to listen to it, and we're going to see how much the sound changes when we add a bunch of mass, but only go by tension. I have to say that tuning without listening is an extremely surreal experience, and I really have to restrain myself from tapping on the drum head because my ears are so desperate to hear what's going on. I have no compass here at all. But ironically, I am holding a kind of drum tuning or tensioning compass. I guess that is true. Yeah. The drum is now tensioned up. I'm specifically not saying tuning because I didn't really tune it. Haven't heard it yet. Let's see what it sounds like. Right out of the gate, the whole sound is lower in pitch. This makes sense because I didn't use my ears to tune this head to the same pitch as before. I used the dial to get to the same tension. More mass under the same tension elicits a lower pitch, same as guitar strings or any other musical instrument that's under tension to create that pitch. We even went so far, Bill Nye the Science Guy, eat your heart out, we weighed the drum heads on a postal scale to see just how much mass we're talking about, and it turned out to only be 7 grams. So we're talking about a very small amount of difference, but it was enough to drop the pitch of the drum significantly at the same tension. Let's give a listen to the pitch of this drum now. We've dropped down now to 389.5 hertz. Pretty fair jump considering how little mass was added here. The interesting thing to note at this point here too is that when you move through different thicknesses and masses of drum heads but go for a similar tuning, you're changing the feel of that instrument dramatically because the actual tension that the head is under is totally different. So this is an opportunity for you at home and also for us here to show you with numbers how the drum feels when we're hitting it. Very difficult to show through video, virtually impossible, but a G12 at 88 feels pretty much one way. And this is a wonderful way to elicit that information, share that information with you. Because we're completely abandoning listening to this tuning and just going by tension, the result is an extremely similar feel between two drum heads that are fundamentally different. This means that if you are going for a certain sort of feel from your instruments, you can try out a bunch of different heads and focus on the feel rather than focusing on trying to tune them all exactly the same, which, you know, if this were a hydraulic or something even thicker, we would be way outside the realm of comfortability if we were cranking it up like that. For those of you out there yelling at whatever screen you're watching this on that we should have been using a DrumDial the whole time because look how simple it is, look how easy it is, I understand where you're coming from. We understand. However, what I want to say right now is that there is no substitute for using your ears. There is also value in a DrumDial for people like us who are ear tuners and who tune from a place of sound first and foremost. Personally, I always thought that devices like this were primarily used by people who were using them in lieu of using their ears. And that's totally fine. I'm not begrudging anybody any way that they get a good sound out of their drums. But having said that, I like to not be dependent on a device to get a sound, but I also love to know as much as possible about the sound that I'm creating and being able to understand tension and also being able to understand that I like some sounds out of a drum that are not under even tension is extremely fascinating. It satisfies the inner nerd and I always want to know more. And any tool or device out there that's going to help me learn about the sound I'm making, I'm in 100%. At the end of the day, there's no substitute for using your ears to find a sound that you like because, first and foremost, we are listening to what we're doing. So following our ears remains the way to go. But I have to say, it was a real blast today learning about the sounds that I like with the DrumDial and also being able to share that information with you in case you want to try and see what this drum feels like at home. By the way, in case anybody's curious, the snare side is a 75 more or less. And don't forget that per the website, we watched the videos, if you're going to use the DrumDial on a snare side head, make sure you don't set it in the snare beds. Always be outside of the snare beds when you're checking tension because there is necessarily less in that area because of the contour of the drum. Special thanks to DrumDial for sponsoring today's episode and making all this possible. We have been curious about the science of drums this whole time making this show, and the DrumDial is truly the best way to be able to understand that intersection of mass and tension and pitch and all of the things that fold into the sound that we're making here.